On this super review live, we're going to take a look at the Fiio M3 Pro. This is a little digital audio player from Fiio, MP3 player for the layman out there. And I think it's kind of cute. What do you think? So this is Fio's latest MP3 player, and it's kind of similar to, or probably a replacement for, the Fiio M3K, which is a DAP I reviewed before. And this thing, it's coming in under $100. At least like the retail price I think is just at $100, but I was able to pick it up on Amazon for $80, and I haven't seen the price go above $80 since then, so I would think of this as an $80 player. For $80, well, we'll get into what you get for that, but maybe just to kind of preface this is a live review. If you're in the live chat, yes, this is live right now. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go through, I'm gonna try something different actually with this review. I'm gonna go through my 5 favorite things about the Fiio M3 Pro, and then I'm also gonna talk about my 5 least favorite things, and at the end of this, I'll give it a score. And while I'm doing this, if you guys have questions about the M3 Pro that I'm not answering in the review, please leave them in the chat. And after the real review, after the core review, I'll spend some time chatting with you guys in live chat and hopefully answer all your questions about the M3 Pro. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the M3 Pro, and let's talk about my first favorite thing about it. And my first favorite thing about the M3 Pro is how well it spins. No, that's not actually my favorite thing about it. One of my favorite things about this player is just the build and how this thing feels in the hand. So one, yeah, it's really nice that it's this compact and small. But above that, beyond just being compact and small, it's actually made out of, I think, pretty nice materials. It feels like it's, you know, just a nice aluminum frame all the way around, and then you've got glass on both the front and the back. That can be kind of a positive or a negative. You can see how many fingerprints I've got there on the back of my device because it is all glass, but it at least is nice feeling materials. And then the other big bonus here, well, it's not even really a bonus, it's just, this is why I like a DAP. It's got buttons. You see that? We've got buttons for doing things, and I personally find that pretty important. This is the reason I want to have a DAP over having, you know, just my music library on a phone. If that doesn't matter to you, just use your phone. But if you're like me and that matters, I would consider something like this Fiio. So yeah, I mean, that's thing number 1, my favorite thing about this. So now that I've told you something that I like about it, maybe I'll tell you something that I don't quite like about it. And this is, I think, maybe a little bit more of a minor issue, but still worth bringing up. Let's go back into here. I'm not actually a big fan of the button layout. So even though it's got buttons, and I'm very thankful for that, I'm not a big fan of the layout that they've gone with. And let's see if we can get this to display on camera okay. So you get 4 buttons, all right? A lot of other DAPs you'll get 5 buttons, or maybe 6 buttons, and this one you get 4. So you don't get as many buttons as I'd like to. So that's one issue, right? Basically what you don't get is you don't get tracks, you don't get dedicated track skipping buttons. You get play, pause, sort of here in the middle. You get volume up and down on either side of that, and then you get a power button right here. And I find it a little bit unintuitive, one, having the play button kind of in the middle. Like, play button in the middle of these two, it would make sense to me if this power button wasn't up here as well, if it was like a set of 3, but because it's a set of 4, I find having the play button in kind of the middle, it's just a little bit unintuitive. And look, it's a thing that you're gonna learn. It's not like a long-term issue, but it's something that, I don't know, I find a little bit annoying. The other thing that's a little bit annoying, and this is my right-handedness coming into play, my right hand privilege, is I actually don't like that the buttons are over here on the left side. So typically I will hold a DAP in my right hand like this, and it's easier for me to activate the buttons when they're on my thumb. Over here they're on the left, and either I have to activate them with my middle and ring fingers like this, but I don't know, maybe if you play guitar, that's pretty easy for you. I'm completely useless with the instruments, so not a skill I have. Or you can use your thumb and you can reach around and press the buttons here, but because this is a touch screen, you kind of risk accidentally activating the touch screen. So I don't know, maybe that's a minor issue, but for me, that one's kind of annoying. And then this is where it's not quite a minor issue when I'm, you know, still here complaining about the buttons, is I mentioned there are no dedicated track skipping buttons, right? Which is true. You've got volume up and down, play, pause, no track skipping. You can do it here with a touchscreen if you want, but you can also use these volume up and down buttons as track skipping buttons, but it only works when the screen is turned off. So basically, when the screen is turned off and you press and hold volume up, it's gonna skip tracks forward or maybe it skips tracks previous. I forget which direction it is, but either way, I really dislike that. I really dislike the inconsistency of it, and frankly, I would rather have a volume button that behaves like a volume button where I can press and hold it and ramp my volume up and down quickly than have access to track skipping on a physical button. So that's my personal vote. Fiio, if you're listening, maybe give us a little firmware update that lets us change that. But it does seem to be a thing that I don't know, I've got 3 different Fiio DAPs. Yeah, I've got 3 different Fiio DAPs and they all do that. So it seems like it's a Fiio thing, not necessarily unique to this player. But, you know, that's just one thing I'm not the biggest fan of. Let's go ahead and talk about another thing that I like. And generally, I think the UI in this player is pretty attractive. You can see right here that, you know, pretty handsome looking. But also, I think it's pretty intuitive to use, you know, versus here is the old M3K, which is not bad, but I don't know, maybe I'm being picky. I feel like these sorts of icons are a little bit on the corny looking side, whereas I think here with the M3 Pro, it's just a little bit more modern and handsome looking. Looks a little bit less like it was pulled out of a Chevy Volt dashboard. So it's handsome, I like that. I also like that it's, you know, a full touchscreen versus the M3K has this sort of like touch sensitive gesture area, which I find difficult to be precise with a touchscreen. I find it to be a lot easier to be precise, although, well, we'll get into that later. But yeah, just the general layout, right? It's pretty typical. You can dig into your artists, click into an album, play your songs, and this is all pretty straightforward. I like the swiping gestures to kind of like go backwards. This reminds me of using a smartphone, even though this is not based on Android or anything like that. This is pretty clearly a custom operating system by Fiio. I generally like that quite a bit. Now, if I had one complaint, let's go back into the complaints because that's what we're here for. If I had a complaint about this gesture UI, it's about this screen right here, the now playing screen. Everywhere else, there's certain things that you can kind of rely on, right? If I'm here on, you know, browsing a song list and I want to jump back to the home screen, I can swipe up from the bottom and it'll jump me back to the home screen. And then I can, you know, click now playing and I'll go back to here. I think that's pretty cool. But if I'm on this screen actually, and I swipe up, it doesn't go back to the home screen. In fact, it just like accidentally toggles one of these buttons down here on the bottom of the screen. The other things that I don't really love about this screen is just kind of randomly, they added this gesture for volume control where you can swipe up and down on the screen. And if this was like a global thing, and you couldn't even make it a global thing because now, you know, if this worked on other screens, you couldn't scan your lists, right? So I just don't like the inconsistency of it. It also, I don't know if you can tell, it's not the most responsive gesture here. And then there's other gestures here as well. If I swipe left and right, I get track skipping, which I've already got buttons for track skipping. I feel like I don't need that here. And sometimes what happens is I'll accidentally activate that instead of activating that back swipe gesture. So I don't know, is that a big deal? It's kind of annoying. I'll be honest, that stuff's kind of annoying, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't outweigh the fact that the UI in general, I think, is pretty strong. So, I mean, let's go back into the positives. Let's talk positive about this thing for a little bit. A couple of just, you know, nice hardware things that you get with the M3 Pro. One, it does have USB-C charging on the bottom of it, and maybe That's not the biggest deal to some people, but I feel like a lot of people here on YouTube, USB-C, that is a big deal, which is a nice upgrade over the USB micro that we had on the old M3K. The other thing that I like about this player too is that they've got the headphone jack, just 3.5 millimeter, but I like that it's on the bottom of the player. And maybe that's just kind of a personal preference, but I don't know, I'm kind of curious. What do you prefer, having your headphone jack on the bottom or the top of your digital audio player? Personally, I'm a big fan of having it on the bottom. It just makes it easy so that I'm holding it in my hand like this, throw it into my pocket with the same direction, and now the cable is pointed out of the top of my pocket rather than sort of being awkwardly twisted around inside my pocket. So that's my personal bias, and yeah, I appreciate that here about the M3 Pro. But now that brings us to some room for complaining, and this complaint, this is a very minor complaint for me, but it might be a bigger deal for some of you other folks. The M3 Pro does not have Bluetooth at all, and that was the same with the M3K, no Bluetooth here, but also no Bluetooth here with the M3 Pro. For me, that's actually not a big deal. I basically just don't ever use Bluetooth with my digital audio players. I'm not a big music listener when it comes to Bluetooth, so for me, not a big deal, but I can imagine that definitely being sort of a deal breaker for some people. On the bright side, they did give you a calculator and an ebook reader. Okay, that's not really a bright side. I'm not wasting one of the 5 things I love on that ebook reader. Don't worry about that. But yeah, if we wanted to talk about the next thing that I love about the Fiio M3 Pro, it's the battery life. And it's not like fantastic battery life. They claim 15 hours of listening time, and that seems to me about right. So for me, 15 hours is that's about 2 days worth of listening. What I do really love about the battery life on this though is the standby time. This thing will, if I turn the screen off and just set it aside for like a week and come back to it later, it might have decreased like 5 or 10%, barely at all. And that for me is huge because that means that I can actually get those 2 days between charges out of the M3 Pro. Might not sound like the greatest battery life, but compared to, I don't know, the player I've been used to listening to, which is the Sony A105, I also get about 2 days with that, and that's like a $300 player versus a little $80 player, so that's not too shabby. Now, that battery life does come with some downsides. You know, I mentioned that this thing has really good standby life, but the way that it gets that is it goes into sort of a standby sleep mode that, I don't know, it creates a couple of small issues. I think these are pretty minor, but definitely worth mentioning. So one, when it's in standby mode and the screen is turned off, the play button won't work. Like, you can't wake the device with the play button. You have to turn the screen on, wait for it to come out of sleep mode, and then you can hit the play button. Now that doesn't happen every time you turn off the screen, right? Right now it is not in sleep mode. I'll have to leave this thing alone for like 5 minutes and then it will go into sleep mode, at which point the play button won't function and I'll have to turn the screen on and wait for it to wake up. Is that a minor issue? I think so, but it is a little bit of a bummer compared to something like my Sony Walkman where just at any moment I can hit the play button and that thing's gonna play. Another thing worth calling out is just kind of some minor UI quirks that are similar to that. So like one, when it's waking, sometimes it takes a while for touch inputs to register. Sometimes there's like weird skips in the music playback, but they're pretty minor in my experience. For an $80 player, I'm not gonna quibble too much about that stuff. What are some other weird quirks with the UI? One thing that's I've seen this on other Fiio players, and it's the case here as well. There is this setting called play through folders. And I leave that thing off because what'll happen is if I want to listen to an album and play through folders is turned on, it'll get to the end of that album and it'll automatically move on to the next album, which I don't want, at least not most of the time. The downside to leaving this thing off is that there's no easy way for me to listen to all of the music by a given artist. Let's go into an artist that I've got a handful of albums for. Let's go into De La Soul, right? I've got, I don't know, like 6 albums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 albums of De La Soul. There's no way for me to just listen to all of this music. unless I left playthrough folders on, in which case I could start from the top and have it play through each of them. And then when it gets to the end, it's going to play through to the next folder, which will be Death's Dynamic Shroud, which isn't really what I wanted. I find it kind of annoying that I'm not able to just easily listen to all of my De La Soul, shuffle my De La Soul, etc., etc. That seems to be a function that's pretty common in most players, and unfortunately is not one here. But we can talk about I think this is number 5. Are you guys keeping track? I'm not keeping track very well, but I think this is number 5. My 5th favorite thing about the Fiio M3 Pro, it's the sound quality. This is an audio review. You guys are kind of expecting some comments on that sound quality, and most of the time when I review digital audio players, I don't have a ton to say. And that's probably still going to be true here with the M3 Pro, but I think that this thing sounds quite good, and there's a handful of things going for it. So one, just outright volume, this thing's actually pretty impressive. I was able to power my HD 600s, my Sennheiser HD 600 sitting right here, to volumes much louder than I was comfortable listening to this thing. So that's pretty impressive. In fact, I think this thing's got more power than my Sony A105, so that's pretty cool. Also impressive is I don't detect any amp hiss, even on my most sensitive IEMs, so that's also pretty impressive, especially for a player that's got, you know, pretty decent power output. You don't always get those things both combined. And then the other comment that I can make on the sound, like, this is why I don't talk a ton about sound, is that most digital audio players to me sound basically the same. There's very, very little to say about them apart from volume and amp hiss, but I can say that I did a little bit of head-to-heading with my Sony A105 and the M3 Pro. I thought the sound was actually a little bit on the bright side compared to the Sony. It didn't seem like it was an artificial brightness. It didn't seem like it was adding any like unwanted glare or anything on the music. It just came across with a little bit of extra emphasis in the treble. Now the difference is minor. Like I personally would not really pick my digital audio players based on the sound signature of the digital audio player, because they all, again, mostly sound the same to me. The headphone that you use is gonna make a way bigger difference than the DAC and the amp that's in this player, but worth calling out that I did find that this little guy was a little bit on the bright side. So worth mentioning. And then I'll leave this to my last mention. There's no custom equalizer. This is my last negative. There's no custom equalizer here on the M3 Pro. Let's see if I can go into play settings. There is an equalizer, but these are your options. You can go with rock, classical, jazz, pop, dance, vocal, metal, but there's no way to customize your EQ with like a 10-band EQ or anything like that. And for me, that's not a deal breaker. In fact, most of the time I really just don't use EQ, but every once in a while I use EQ, and it's a little bit of a bummer to not have a custom EQ here on the M3 Pro. But I don't know, I think that kind of wraps it up for my thoughts on the M3 Pro. Those are my 5 favorite things, 5 least favorite things. So might as well give you guys a score, and out of 5 stars, I think the Fiio M3 Pro at 80 bucks, I'd give this thing 3 stars. And I was actually kind of borderline. I almost wanted to give it 4 stars because I really do love the size of this thing and the fact that it sounds so good and has pretty decent battery life. For 80 bucks, that's kind of a lot going for it. It's got, I don't know, enough annoying things with the UI and quirks like that that hold me back from really loving this thing, but I can see if you're shopping in the market for a digital audio player that's kind of budget, not looking to spend a lot of money, this is not a bad option. In fact, it's probably my favorite option under 100 bucks. The only other thing I might consider is the X Duo X3 Mark II, which that one actually does have quite a bit of amp hiss, so with sensitive IEMs, I would definitely pick here. But otherwise, the UI and the button configuration especially, I prefer on the X Duo. So anyway, that is the Fiio M3 Pro. If you're interested in checking this thing out, of course, I've got links in the description down below. If you like this video, if this review was helpful, please hit the like button. Helps other people find it. Subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be a part of the next live chat discussion we're having. Ding the bell, YouTube will let you know when I'm live. For the folks that are here live right now, let's go ahead and talk about the Fiio M3 Pro, or really anything audio related that's on your mind, or even not audio related. If you got some other things on your mind, bring it up. Let's talk. All right. Apologize if I'm looking down this way. I've got live chat here. You guys are still there. It's a little awkward, but we'll make it work. Joshua, tech for your needs, Ram, Winkern boys, all saying what's up, what's up. DNTR saying nice and early today. So I'm actually curious, if it's early where you're at, where are you at? Because right here it is 8 p.m. I'm about to go to bed soon. Ram Murigan asking, suggest best gaming IEM with a microphone or without, maybe less than $100. So I say this kind of frequently in my comments because people ask me about, gaming and IEMs. I actually don't game in my IEMs at all. If I'm gaming, I don't have it here next to me, it's over there. If I'm gaming, I use my Koss KPH30i. It's a $30 headphone, it's got a microphone in it, it's open back, so imaging is pretty strong on it, especially for a $30 headphone. For gaming, that's my choice, the Koss KPH30i. Check it out. We got Arrow Code saying, I need that shirt. So you want this shirt? You want to dress like me? You want to dress like a 37-year-old man? You can. So this is a shirt that I have custom printed on Teespring. I should have a link in a pinned comment. Also, if you're in the live chat, I think I've got a link pinned to the live chat. I don't really know how YouTube works, but this is available in my store and you can be able to pick it up. I think it's like 20 bucks. I try to make it as cheap as possible. If you want to wear the high-res placebo shirt, you want to be high-res just like this Fiio M3 Pro player, get this shirt today. Randerson, what's up, my friend? In Hot Limit asking, does Spotify work on this? So the answer is no. I mentioned this thing doesn't have Bluetooth. It also doesn't have Wi-Fi, right? There's no apps. You're not gonna get Spotify on this thing. It's just a music player. You gotta bring your own music library to it. For me, that's okay because that's the only way I really listen to music. But if you're looking for something that plays Spotify, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. P. Thomas saying, I have the Fiio M6. It's been working fine for me so far. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. How do you feel about the M6, which I've actually got sitting right here in case you're curious. Maybe I'll show those things side by side. This is the Fiio M6. This is the Fiio M3 Pro, and the M6 is an Android-based audio player. It's got some of the same weird UI quirks as the M3 Pro, right? In terms of button configuration, if you press and hold the button, it'll skip tracks, and I find that pretty annoying, but there are some nice benefits here to this player. I don't think I have any music on it, so probably not gonna really be able to show you the UI very well. But one thing that's kind of cool about this player is that you can now sideload whatever app you want, including Spotify. And Pulsar is a music app on Android that I like to play, or I like to use, so I was able to load that on this little player. Battery life on the M6, not quite as good as the M3 Pro, at least especially not the standby battery life, but that's what you get for having an Android-based player. Also notable too is that this player has come down in price. I think when it shipped, it was around 150, 180 bucks. Now I've seen it for 130 bucks. So if this thing's at full price at 100 bucks, 30 bucks extra for the M6, that's kind of hard not to do because I think that there are some definite benefits to it. But if this thing stays at 80 bucks, I think there's still a pretty good argument for the M3 Pro. Optato saying that layout is weird AF. I kind of agree. Talking about the button layout here on the M3 Pro. Should have had the on button on the top, volume buttons on the right, and pause on the left. So yeah, so here's the M3 Pro. The M6 has actually got the volume button on the top, and then it's got the other buttons over here on the left. But it's also got its own weird quirks in that, I mentioned here the play button is in between the volume up and down buttons, and here the play button is on top of the volume up and down buttons. neither of these are really very intuitive. Fiio, if you guys want any help with making your players a little bit more intuitive, feel free to reach out to me and I will give you my suggestions. Not that I necessarily know what I'm talking about, but kind of know what I'm talking about. I think I know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you think I know what I'm talking about. When it comes to UI, I feel like I know what I'm talking about. Jay saying, I'm glad you do live streams on reviews. Cool, I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I've been doing these now for a couple of months, basically since quarantine started. I've been doing the live stream stuff and I also enjoy it. I enjoy talking with you guys, and if you guys like talking with me, that's awesome. Glad you're here in the live chat. But if you want to talk with me outside of live chat, I also have a Discord server, and I've got that linked in that same pinned comment below this video. If you want to join the Discord server, feel free to join. I'm in there all the time, answer questions, just talk about random things. You can show off the gear that you're getting. Yeah, we have fun there. No assholes though. What's up, El Jefe? Randerson saying it's too expensive. So 80 bucks for the M3 Pro, too expensive. What do you think is like a good price for what you would expect to pay for kind of a basic MP3 player? I remember I really like the SanDisk, the Sansa Clip. It was like 30 bucks, and for that, it was pretty strong. It also didn't have a lot of features, also didn't have Bluetooth, also, that actually might have had an EQ, I can't remember, but yeah, 30 bucks for a really basic player, that's not bad. I feel like 80 bucks is a pretty good price for the M3 Pro. It's up into it. Yeah, Sayana saying, love the t-shirt and it's accurate. That's right, the file is high-res audio certified. And if you want your high-res, if you want to upgrade your own personal resolution, feel free to get the high-res placebo t-shirt and you will sound just as good as the Fiio M3 Pro. I don't guarantee that, by the way. Uki asking, have I heard of the TensGym Cora IEM? I have heard of the TensGym Cora, but I don't know too much about it, frankly. Although, maybe worth calling out, I actually do here in the studio have the TensGym Hana, which I'll be unboxing very soon. In fact, I've got the TensGym Hana as well as the Moondrop KXXX. And I'm gonna do, I think, a live unboxing of both of those IEMs in the very, very near future. I'm very interested to get my ears on them, so I gotta unbox them pretty soon. Hank McCoy saying bottom earphone port looks better than top IMO. I agree. Who disagrees? I know there are people out there that like having the headphone jack on the top, but I would like to know, are the bottom jackers, are we bottom jackers outnumbering the top jackers? Saboteur saying, I bought the M3 Pro a few weeks ago before trying, and I agree that it's bright. In fact, if you do have bright IEMs already, I would maybe look for another. Yeah, I don't know. We actually just had a discussion about this in my Discord channel, talking about matching headphones or IEMs to a player, and my general guidance is that it doesn't really matter. Personal opinion. The differences that you get in a player like this versus something like the Sony A105, it's noticeable if you're really listening carefully, but for the most part, in my opinion, it doesn't make a big difference. So I personally would not be worried about pairing a bright IEM with this, but if you're especially sensitive to brightness and you've got an earphone or a headphone that's just like borderline for you, maybe consider something other than the M3 Pro. Likewise, if you've got something that you like to listen to, but you wish it was just a tad smidge brighter and you don't want EQ, yeah, maybe you could try the M3 Pro. But really, I think most people just won't notice the difference because it's not that big. Dirt Guy Mud saying, I got this MP3 player. It's great. So yeah, Dirt Guy Mud, what's your favorite thing about this? You don't have to give me your 5 favorite things. What's your one favorite thing about the M3 Pro? It's 4 a.m. in Monaco. That's pretty late. Or is it early for you? I actually wake up around like 5:30, so that's close to early for me. No, that's definitely early for me. That would be way, way late. Shintanu is asking, maybe the Sony A55 is best. Maybe, I mean, it depends on how much you want to spend, right? This is an $80 player. The Sony A55, I think, is about $220 player. And if you're going to spend around 200 bucks, I still think the Sony players are my personal favorite because the UI is awesome. They've got all the buttons you need. There's no funkiness with volume buttons and accidentally track skipping like that. And then the battery life is just fantastic on the A45 and the A55. You can get like 40 hours of battery life. I can get through almost an entire week between charges with the A45. So those are pretty compelling players. Now, I think this thing actually gets louder than those players. So if you need it to be louder, that can be a bonus here. I think also there's, no amp hiss here, whereas with both the A45 and my A105, I think as well the A55, there is a little bit of amp hiss with really sensitive IEMs, so something to consider. Oh, DNTRX saying it's 10 p.m. over here, so you must also be in the United States. You're just glad that you caught the live stream early. I'm also glad you're here early. Thick Hunter said you skipped the M3 Pro for the A55, which you got for $150. That is a killer deal for the Sony A55. Where'd you get it for $150? That's pretty good. One Kern asking about the TRN X6. It's a mid-centric IEM with 6 balanced armatures. I gotta say that one's not on my radar, sorry. I don't know, maybe I'll look into it a little bit, but that one's not really on my radar. How much does the X6 cost? Is that something that's like cheap enough that I could buy it and then give you like a quick review on Discord or something like that? Into Dodo asking, does it work with a 250 ohm headphone? And yes, so I mentioned I tried my Sennheiser HD600s over here. That is a 300 ohm headphone, and I found that it got plenty loud. Now, I mean, it's worth calling out is that the ohm rating of your headphone isn't the only factor in terms of how loud or how much power it requires to get to loud volumes. There's other things that, there's the sensitivity of the driver. That's also going to make a big difference, but assuming that it's, roughly similarly power needy as the Sennheiser HD600s, I think it'll work plenty fine with your 250 ohm headphones. Daniel Marcos asking, is it worth upgrading my Sony NWA45 to either the M3 Pro or the A55? In my opinion, no, but I guess it depends on what you're looking to get out of it. So I also have the A45. I don't have the A55, but I've played around with one a little bit. In my experience, the A45 and the 55 were very, very hard to tell apart. I mean, there's some physical differences between them. I think that the processor in the A55 is a little bit faster, so there's less slowdown in the UI. But generally, if we take the A45 as sort of the baseline, I find the UI and the speed of the UI on the A45 much better than the M3 Pro. Now, I paid over 200 bucks for my A45, so I don't know that that's necessarily a super fair comparison. But just to set your expectations, if you're looking for an upgrade from that player, in my opinion, it's not this. You asking, how does the sound compare with the Heidi's AP80 Pro? So, I'll throw that in here just so you can look at it. This is another DAP that I'm reviewing. I decided to go ahead and finish my review of the M3 Pro first, but this is one that I'll be working on. I should be doing a live review of the AP80 Pro soon. I'll be honest, I have not done like a head-to-head comparison between these two players, so I can't tell you exactly what the sound differences are. I mean, I can say that they don't sound obviously different to me. That's mostly true with most of my DAPs, so take that for what it is. Yeah, I think the AP80 Pro sounds pretty great. I don't have any complaints about it, but it really will take me doing a very deliberate head-to-head with my switcher for me to tell any audio differences between that, this, and my Sony. Dirt Guy Mud saying the usability and buttons allow me to skip tracks in my pocket. So yeah, I think I asked Dirt Guy Mud, what his favorite thing about the M3 Pro was, and it's having physical buttons, which I agree. Yeah, I wish I could be the sort of person that's just totally happy to listen to all my music library on my phone. Except I use an iPhone, and I think iPhone is actually really bad for managing a music library. But let's say I was using Android all the time, it would be really convenient to just be satisfied with having all my music on my phone and carrying around one device, but I like having buttons, and unfortunately there's no buttons on phones. It would be nice if like the manufacturers like let you turn the camera button into a pause play button or something like that. There are like hacks that you can make it work. At least I found some hacks that'll make it work, but it's always got some problems. It's always got some weird glitchy goofiness. Radiant Locuson asking, have I ever tried any player from Estelle and Kern? Are they worth it? I have not tried any Estelle and Kern players, no. If Estelle and Kern is watching and you want me to review your gear, please connect with me. But no, I have not reviewed anything from AK. Thick Hunter said, you got it from a local Sony shop. So this is referring to the $150 A55, a local Sony shop with member benefits from the mall and a discount from Sony. That sounds pretty particular to you, unfortunately. Not something that we're gonna be able to jump in on, huh? Manny Garcia asking, how does it stand up to the BTR5? Now, I don't know that there's a ton of overlap between this Fiio M3 Pro and Fio's BTR5, right? The BTR5 is a Bluetooth thingamajig that you can basically use to turn your headphones into Bluetooth. This doesn't even have Bluetooth, so it doesn't really fulfill the same purpose. In terms of sound quality, I'm gonna guess, I haven't actually used the BTR5, I'm gonna guess, I'm just gonna throw it out there. I would have a hard time telling a difference between them. But still, personally, I'm just not a big fan of Bluetooth, so personally my choice between the two would be this, but it's doing very different things, so I don't know if that's a super valid comparison. And it looks like the TRN X6 costs around 65 bucks. That's almost cheap enough to take a stab at, but I don't know. I think that's gonna bring us to the end here of this live stream. Thank you guys for watching. That is the Fiio M3 Pro. Again, I give it 3 stars out of 5. I think this is a pretty good little player. It's got some quirks, got some issues, but on the whole, I quite enjoy it. Again, just for the size and having buttons, being able to carry it around, battery, the standby battery life that just lasts forever. Those are my favorite things about this thing. My least favorite thing is probably the fact that the volume buttons skip tracks when the screen is turned off. If they change that, I'll be much more happy with this device. But that is my review. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the bell. I'll see you guys in the next live stream, and join the Discord if you want to talk before then. Anyway, thank you all for watching.